Alright, this is Block 3, Progressives in Power, Part 2, Who Were the Progressives, and the section starting with what's known as the social gospel. Now that I've freaked you out about progressivism and the pure scientific basis on which it is supposedly founded, it has a softer side also. And kind of technocracy and pragmatism were one aspect of progressivism, and another is what's known as the social gospel. And the social gospel is a movement in the late 19th century, in the early 20th century, which emphasized that in order to be, it's a religious movement, in order to be, because remember, progressives are largely middle-class religious people. In order to gain salvation, to be saved by God, it is not enough to be baptized and to go to Mass and to do the sacraments and to pray every day. In order to be saved, to earn religious salvation, you had to do charity and social work. The social gospel. Gospel like the good news, the gospel of Christ. And social, meaning in society. Then the social gospel is this idea to gain salvation, all of you middle-class religious progressives, in order to gain salvation, you had to go work with and help the poor and the less fortunate. And some very famous organizations that we are all familiar with got their start in this social gospel movement, including the Salvation Army, and we've all seen the little bell ringers on the street at Christmas collecting charity, and the YMCA, which stands for the Young Men's Christian Association. And both the Salvation Army and the YMCA provided food, housing, supplies, education for the poor, for immigrants, and for the unemployed. And their good work and their charity has been going strong for well over 100 years. Social gospel. One of its proponents, I gotta get rid of this one, this is from the last little lecture, was a guy named Dwight Moody. Let's see if we can find some more cool beards. Everyone now has cool beards. Yep, cool beard, you always know. It's a pretty epic mustache and beard right there. Dwight Moody was an evangelist, a preacher who preached the social gospel. So was this guy, Washington Gladden. The names, more epically cool beards. The names are not going to pop up on an AP test. The names are good for filling in FRQs and DBQs and make you sound, so if you're talking about the social gospel, they expect you to know what the social gospel is, the AP graders. They would be impressed if you could attach a name or two, like Dwight L. Moody or Washington Gladden. Social gospel practitioners such as Washington Gladden and Dwight L. Moody believed that people were saved by their good works in charity and helping the poor. That's why I'm giving you all these names. Not to say you must memorize every single one of these names for the test. That's not what I'm after here. The most famous practitioner of the social gospel is someone without a cool beard, because she's a woman. She has a cool hat, which helps. This is Jane Addams. Jane Addams was one of America's most famous and most important social reformers. And what she did, she was from Chicago, she worked in Chicago, and she founded what's known as Hull House, H-U-L-L, Hull House. And Hull House was this giant building in Chicago where the poor and immigrants could come and live. It's the first private social welfare agency in the United States. And what would happen in the Hull House? Jane Addams and other middle-class reformers would go into the city and live there. Jane Addams and all of her middle-class women would live in Hull House alongside poor people, immigrants, juvenile delinquents, people on the bottom rungs of society. And the idea was that if you could teach immigrants and the poor and juvenile delinquents middle-class values, the values of hard work and thrift and sobriety, if you could teach these values by example and by explicit teaching, cleanliness, hygiene, you could turn the poor into productive citizens. That's Jane Addams's theory. And she goes and takes this theory and puts it into practice with this Hull House. This was the first one. There grows to be Hull Houses in every city in the United States. And they were used for all sorts of services, like we talked about. Food, yes. A place to sleep, yes. But also classes in English. Job training. Everything we think of today that kind of is social welfare was provided by Jane Addams and her Hull House in cities and towns across America. They would buy houses in slum areas, bring middle-class people into these slums to live and to work alongside poor and immigrant families, and to teach them skills and values. And Jane Addams became one of America's most famous social reformers and did a lot of good work. Another reform. So Jane Addams is an important one to remember. You're going to want to remember her. Henry Ward Beecher is another one. He also has no beard, but nor does he have a funny hat. He was an early progressive. He was active in the anti-slavery movement, but after the Civil War, as an older man, Beecher was active also in the social gospel movement. As was, here's some more names dropping on you here. Here's a good name. You think he might be German? Walter S.C.H. Rauschenbusch. Here's Walter Rauschenbusch. Walter Rauschenbusch was a New York progressive clergyman who preached the social gospel. He worked, like Jane Addams, to alleviate poverty, to provide for immigrants, to provide for the poor, and he also throws in within his oeuvre, he also throws in peace between capital and labor. He also throws in an attempt to kind of get the business owners and the workers to kind of meet in the middle and help each other out. That he did not think that there need be labor strife, and that owners and labor could work together to form and create equitable solutions to their problems. Social gospel is another main avenue, and an avenue that's a lot more palatable to the ear of 2012 realm of the progressive movement.